Thank you for tuning in to the latest edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. Whether you're listening during your commute, while working out, or just relaxing at home, we appreciate you. Every download, every listen, and every subscription means a lot. Up next, the 12 Kyle podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. Thank you for downloading. And thank you for subscribing to the latest edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. I am your boy, 12 Kyle. Man, check this out. On this episode, what I want to talk about is, you see the title, you see the cover art, Keyz to the City. This is a reflection and a recap of my birthday week. At the time of this recording, I have recently reached the age of 52. And what I decided to do earlier this calendar year, I told myself I'd take a trip. If you know me, that I don't really do a lot of stuff for me per se. I let others do that, and then I'm usually the one that's doing it, and that's cool. That's how I'm wired. But I made the decision to, when it came to my birthday this year, I was going to celebrate my birthday, and what better place than celebrating in the City of Angels? So I booked a flight, hotel, rental car, the whole nine, earlier this summer, and I've been waiting and looking forward to this trip for a number of reasons, but more than anything else, obviously to celebrate my birthday, but just to really chill and relax. If you know me, I'm constantly on the go here. I'm constantly on the go with the kids, with my wife, with work. But this is going to be a time to just kind of get away and just reflect on 52 years of existence on this earth and have a good time. And I didn't have any type of itinerary. It was going to be like, hey, you just go and have fun and you do what you do, and you're going to eat and you're going to chill and you're going to kick it with your friends. And you're going to kick it by yourself too as well. And I'm perfectly cool with doing all of those things. So I set the trip up, and I wanted to use this episode to reflect and kind of bring you in as to how my week went. So first, let's start with the Sunday, December 8th. Right? This is the day before my birthday, which is December 9th. I'll be honest, like, I was flying out Sunday morning from Atlanta to Ontario, California, which is right outside of LA. I didn't sleep a lot. I kind of felt like, that kid in the candy store, like you're anticipating like Christmas or something. And so I may have slept 3.5 hours, maybe 4 at the most. But here's the funny thing. Like, I was chopping it up with my homegirl, Britt. Shout out to Britt Renee from the I Can Talk About This All Day podcast. More on Britt in a minute. But I was texting with Britt, and I told her, like, it was midnight and I still hadn't packed yet. and don't get me wrong, I had my clothes out. I know what I wanted to wear, because I was going from obviously Atlanta to LA. Very different weather. In fact, when I left Atlanta that Sunday morning, it was 30 degrees, and I landed in LA, it was 75. So, I was like, man, I should pack a couple of shorts. And like I said, I really didn't have much of an agenda as far as an itinerary of things to do. I did pack an extra hoodie and some sweatpants and some running shoes because I wanted to run or hike Runyon Canyon. Never made it to Runyon Canyon. I've done it before, but didn't make it. Nonetheless, I didn't really sleep. I finally packed around, I don't know, midnight. And I think I fell asleep somewhere around 2. And it seemed like as soon as my head hit the pillow, it was time to get up. So get up, drove to the airport, and, hopped on a flight to Ontario. And I landed in Ontario. Like, again, beautiful weather. I think my flight landed around 10:45. I always like to catch the early flight that way, the earliest flight to LA. And the reason being is that I want to, whatever day that I come in, I want to experience that whole day. And I knew that I needed to do that because I knew I was going to be flying back relatively in the middle of the day. So I wasn't going to be able to get the full experience of the day. So got there. The cool part about flying into Ontario, one, it was cheaper than flying into LAX and less hassle. But also, it's not far away from my boy, Baylor. BTG for President. That is the podcast. He also has another podcast called Open Run with BTG. You guys have seen and heard Baylor on this episode, or excuse me, on this podcast before. And I've been on his podcast as well. Baylor is my brother, like a little brother to me. And he's 10 years younger than me. And I officially met Baylor in 2021 when me and my family had gone out to LA to go to Disneyland for Thanksgiving. And so this would be the second time that I've met Baylor, but me and Baylor, we talk or text like every other day. It will probably closer to every day. And so I was going to see him and, go by his house or whatever like that. And so he doesn't live far from that airport. I think it may have taken me, I don't know, 7 or 8 minutes to get to his house. He wasn't far at all. And I drove to his house and I pulled up, got out, went to his house. And here's the great thing about going to his house was that I got a chance to meet his wife, Marcy. Shout out to Marcy, who is cool as hell. His son, Keyz, and his daughter, Bailey. Never had met. I've seen pictures and stuff like that because we're connected on social media, but never met his family before. So it was cool meeting them. And Bailey, man, she looks just like both of them. Like she looked like they spit her out for real. And also it wasn't a surprise, but one of the other highlights of the trip was I was going to get a chance to meet the aforementioned Britt Renee from the I Can Talk About This All Day podcast. Britt was out in LA. She had gone out. I think Britt and her son Zai, they flew out on, I want to say Thursday. Thursday evening, I think. And Britt was flying from Iowa, where she lives. And so she was really getting out of the cold to come to LA. And she and Baylor had been friends. They've been friends for like 18 years. So she was staying with Baylor. So that was even better because I got a chance to meet Britt. And so I was looking forward to meeting Britt. Britt, as cool as they come. Just a dope person, just a very sweet personality. I mean, I already knew this because obviously Britt has been on this podcast several times. So you know how people are. I'd like to think that like even when I meet people in person, I want them to be as cool as I imagine them to be. And I try to make sure that I'm the same way. Like, I don't want people to turn on this podcast and hear me look and sound a certain way. And then like when they meet me in person, I'm somebody totally different. I could never do that. Like I have to be Kyle. I haven't gotten this far being anyone else. So it was dope meeting Britt and her son Zai. And so we just sat around Baylor's crib, after hugging and everything like that and chopping it up. We were going to go to brunch because at this time, now keep in mind, I left Atlanta, didn't eat anything. So I'm starving. And we were also going to be joined by the great, the wealthy, the billionaire, Uncle Dolomite from the Too Much Game podcast. Now you guys have seen and heard Dolomite on this podcast as well. And that's my man. Again, I'm 10 years older than him, but just a solid dude, man. And someone that I consider, both he and Baylor and Britt for that matter, all people that I consider to be friends. And I don't throw that word around lightly at all. But I'd never met Dolomite before. Dolomite and I talk on the phone and we, send messages all day long, but I've never met him before. And so we decided to have brunch at this spot called the Violet Rooster. A very inconspicuous name, but food was dope. We get there and we're chilling there for a little bit, and then Dolomite pulls up. He pulls up in the Tessie, and so it was dope finally meeting that brother, man. I mean, my thing with sometimes when I meet people in person for the first time, it just like anything else, it feels like we've known each other way longer. Like I know that I've only, like I said, I started kicking with Bill in 2021, but it seems like I've known him, lifetime. Same for Dolomite, same for Britt. And these are genuine good people. And I've surrounding myself around good people. And it's funny because we were talking before we went to brunch, and I was kind of explaining to Marcy like how, I guess in her mind she was asking like, how is it that you meet these people online where you really physically haven't met them, but you develop these bonds and this kinship? And I was like, it's pretty simple. Like, real recognize real. So, we're not people who put on air. So Britt is as real as she is, and Dolomite's as real as he is, and Baylor's as real as he is. So, so that was dope. So we went to brunch. All of us sat there and ate and talked and laughed and joked, and it was dope. And the kids had a little table right next to us. We sat outside too. That was, listen, I really appreciate sitting outside because, where I am now, it's not really warm enough to sit. Up until a couple of weeks ago, it wasn't warm enough. I mean, you could probably sit outside. I want to be comfortable if I'm sitting outside. And I mean, sitting in 75-degree weather is about as comfortable as you want to be. I was out there with a t-shirt on, you know what I'm saying? No jacket, no hoodie, no nothing. So I was good. But the food was great. Conversation was even better. Before we left, we all took pictures together, flicked it up. I think Britt and Dolomite and Baylor and I think I did too, post a couple of pictures and stuff. So that was dope. And we all went back to Baylor's house, sat and kicked it for a little bit. Now, we couldn't stay there that long because, and I think we may have sat for another 30, 40 minutes or so. But Baylor and Marcy and I think Bailey went to the game too. Yeah, she did. They were, and Britt and Zai, they were all going to the Lakers game. The Lakers, I think, the night were playing the Portland Trailblazers. So me and Dolomite weren't going to the game. But what was interesting was when they left, man, me and Dolomite stood out in the street on Baylor's block, and we probably talked, I don't know, another 30, 45 minutes, just shooting the shit, So that was dope. And, I told Dolomite, I was like, look, man, I know he had a crazy schedule. So I was like, look, I'm out here all week. I don't have anything planned. We'll link up again later this week. And that's why I didn't want to have an itinerary, because I like to be able to move at a moment's notice. And I'll tell you about that in just a few minutes. So after I left Baylor's house, I drove over to Pasadena, which is probably about another 30 miles away. My cousin Scott lives in Pasadena, and my cousin Scott is one of the coolest, one of the most down to earth, humble cats you'd ever want to be around. Scott's mom, my Aunt Connie, and my dad are brother and sister. My Aunt Connie passed away, unfortunately, a couple of years ago, and I miss her. I miss her a lot, and she was just one of the sweetest people you'd ever want to be around. And Scott's the oldest, and Scott is very well accomplished, probably one of the smartest people on the face of this earth, but you wouldn't know it. Like, Scott is someone who has accomplished so much, but you would never know, because he never tell you like half the stuff that he's done. But I hadn't, and it didn't dawn on me, like I hadn't seen Scott since of course we keep up on IG and Facebook, but I hadn't seen Scott since our grandmother passed in 2017. And so it was great going to his house and seeing him. Scott, I think Scott had moved to LA because he was living in Virginia. I want to say Scott's been in Virginia. He's been in LA 4 or 5 years now. He hadn't been in LA that long. But he and his wife Anastasia, shout out to Anastasia, they moved out west and they love it. And so it was great seeing him and great seeing Anastasia. Their daughter Nia. Nia is what, 20? I think Nia's and Dion around the same age. So I think Nia's like 24, 25. And I follow her on Instagram and Facebook, and she is the best. She is a budding star for real. Super, super talented. And she, of course, has an older sister, Kiara. I didn't see Kiara until I was about to leave, but I was glad I saw Kiara because I hadn't seen Kiara in years. And she's now a mom of River's what? He's almost two. River wasn't there, but I got a chance to see Kiara. And of course, they have a brother, Jonathan. Jonathan lives in Houston. but it was great seeing my cousins. You don't really get, and for me, I don't get a chance to see my dad's side of the family that often. Um, so I'm always excited anytime I get a chance to see him. And so I was over there maybe for a couple of hours, just kicking it with them, and we had a good time just talking, man. It was just dope just to be, seeing family and everything. And it worked out perfectly because Scott was going to DC for the rest of the week. So Sunday was the only day that I was going to see him. So as far as an itinerary, that was my only plan. I had to see Scott on Sunday. So I leave there, shoot downtown and check into my hotel, and everything's cool. I kind of relax and kick back. Next thing you know, you wake up and it's Monday morning. Monday, December 9th, 1972, 52 years ago that day I was born. I'm not really somebody who makes a big fuss, or at least growing up, I was taught like you don't make a big fuss about your birthday. Like, so I just never did. Like, but I appreciate everybody who does, or at least acknowledges the birthday, because you don't necessarily have to. And I think that's just the Sagittarius in me. And I think that's also because, your birthday is a couple of weeks from Christmas. So, I remember when I was younger, it was like, hey, what do you want? You want a Christmas gift or you want a birthday gift? It was just like that. But, so, wake up, and I remember my wife, Cherishing, she FaceTimed me, and I spoke to Skylar, and then our sons, Dion and Cameron, they both called me. Brandon sent me a text. I don't know why he sent me a text, but he sent me a text, wishing me a happy birthday. But that was dope. I mean, and then my mom, I spoke to my mom on the phone, and I spoke to my dad. And, I'll be honest, of all the well wishes and everything, it really feels good to hear from my parents. And it's not something that I take lightly. I'm very thankful and grateful to have them here with me on this earth. And I just hope and pray that they keep, the birthdays keep rolling, and they keep calling me to wish me a happy birthday. And what's always interesting is that my parents always, because they're not together, they always have like some type of story or some type of anecdote about when I was born, or how life was after that. And, they both tell me all the time, like that was the happiest day of their life. And, so that always puts a smile on my face, and I was able to, feel that love and everything once I became a father. But yeah, I don't take talking to my parents on my birthday for granted at all. But again, I said it on social media. I want to say it again to all of you. I thank you for the text messages, the posts, the tweets, everything that everybody said, wishing me a happy birthday. It didn't go unnoticed. I am very thankful and very grateful. I appreciate it because, again, you don't have to do it. So yeah, that was dope in and of itself. And then getting text messages from friends, and a couple of people that was like, "Hey, what you doing for your birthday?" I was like, "Oh, I'm in LA." "You in LA? What are you doing in LA?" So I got a lot of that from people who didn't know that I was actually, getting out of town. But yeah, it was dope. So what I did was, that was Monday morning. What I did was I drove to Long Beach and had breakfast with a day one, my boy Jay Fresh. Now, if you've been following the podcast, you guys have heard me talk a lot about Jay Fresh. Jay Fresh and I have been friends since we were 6 years old. We grew up together in Florence, South Carolina. We actually moved to Atlanta together in 1997, and we lived together for a year. And then Fresh moved out to LA, and he's been out there 21 years, I think, 21, 22 years, something like that. He's been out there a long time. He's almost been out there as long as I've been in Atlanta. But yeah, so we had breakfast at this spot called the Breakfast Bar in Long Beach, and we just kicked it, man. First of all, it's always good to see him. I mean, me and Fresh talk. If we don't talk, we'll text every day. And so it was good seeing him. I hadn't seen him. I hadn't seen him since last time I came to LA, which was 2021. So it was good seeing him. And after we ate breakfast was really, really good. We sat outside. So again, feeling good, sitting outside eating breakfast. We went back to his crib and, just posted up, just laughed and reminisced about the old times growing up and our days in high school and what we used to do. And it was interesting, like a couple of things I was reminding him of. I was like, man, remember we did such and such and such? He's like, nah, I don't remember that. I was like, man, you can't. And I'm older than him. I'm like, how do you not remember this stuff? But he said that the drugs and alcohol have robbed his memory. But it was good, always good seeing Jay Fresh. Again, that's anybody knows me knew if I told you I was coming to LA, you know who I'm gonna be with. I'm gonna be with him no matter what. So that's it's rare for people to have friends from the age of 6 all the way through 52. And he's 51. So I mean, like when I say day one, I mean he ain't really, I can't really call him a day one. He's really like a day zero. But kicked it in Long Beach with him. After that, I came back to the city, walked around a little bit, and the weather was, it might have been like 71 degrees, so it was perfect weather. Wasn't too hot. I walked downtown, and then ended up eating dinner at this place called Mastro's. Now, Mastro's was referred to me by my cousin Nia. And she told me, she was like, hey, she was like, because she asked me like, where was I going to eat for my birthday? Up until that point, I had not decided. And this was Sunday. And so the next day, Monday, my birthday, I decided to go. She sent me a list of places to choose from. And Mastro's is a place that I chose. And it was a great choice. Mastro's was located directly across the street from the Staples Center, or what they now call Crypto.com Arena, but it'll always be the Staples Center to me. That's the house that Kobe built. But man, I had this steak. Oh my God, I can still taste that steak to this day. Probably one of the best steaks I've had ever. And so if you're ever in LA, check out Mastro's. There may be more than one, but the one that I went to is on Figueroa, right across from Staples Center. But yeah, dinner was dope. I had a couple of glasses of champagne to celebrate my birthday. Took some pictures and walked back to my hotel, which was like maybe 6 or 7 blocks up the street. So it was a nice little walk. Then we moved to Tuesday, December 10th. Now, what's interesting is, again, my birthday is December 9th. If you know me, you know what happened on December 10th. December 10th, we had our son Brandon. So he turned 18 on December 10th. So while I'm celebrating my birthday on the 9th, his birthday's on the 10th. So I think I know I called him first thing Tuesday morning. Obviously the time difference, he's 3 hours ahead. So, but it didn't really matter to me because I was up. Like I try going out west it's pretty easy because to me, the time difference almost seems like you have a longer day. Like I didn't mind being up at 4 o'clock in the morning because like I could get on my phone, send memes, stuff like that, chat with my friends, and still have a full day ahead of me. So I actually like that. Coming back east, that's when you get that jet lag, but I was cool. So yeah, I hit Brandon up. And we had made plans to go to this place called the Court Cafe. It's on Centennial Avenue. Now I'm not sure if I know the address says LA, but I'm not sure if that's LA or Inglewood. It's probably LA. That's my guess. But I had breakfast with one of my teammates, one of my former teammates, my boy Carnell, aka Big C. Carnell is from LA. What's interesting about Carnell is that Carnell is one of the only people, at least during my time, that played football at South Carolina State University, where we went to college at, that was from LA. Like I've never known us to recruit, at least during that time frame when we were in school. I don't think we recruited anybody else from LA. And so that tells you he was a bad boy. Carnell, great dude, just a big teddy bear dude, funny dude, very smart, very educated, very knowledgeable on a lot of things. On the football field, Carnell would tear your head off. And I tell anybody, man, he's one of those dudes, man. I was always glad he was on my side. And it's funny because like I was telling him, when I hit him up earlier, earlier this year, and I said, hey, I'm coming out there for my birthday. He's like, all right, well, let me know, before you come out here. And I hit him up maybe a couple of weeks ago, prior to the trip. And I said, hey, man, I'm going to be moving around. I was like, so if I don't get a chance to see you, I just want you to know I'm going to be in town, blah, 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 blah. His response was, hey, man, if you come to LA, there's no way I'm not going to see you. So, I mean, that just, when you have that kind of bond as far as like us being Bulldogs, which is our school mascot, it put a smile on my face, but that's Cornell. Like, if you come to LA, you got to see him. He's going to make sure that he takes care of you. So he took me to breakfast, which I thought was dope because I was actually going to pay for breakfast, because the last time I saw him in LA was when we came out for the Disneyland trip, and we met at like IHOP, and he drove out to Anaheim. So I know that wasn't close to him, right? But he had the day off, and so he's like, I'm gonna take you to breakfast. I was like, all right, cool. So we went to this place called what I said, the Court Cafe. Listen, if you're ever in LA, check out the Court Cafe. That place, the food is incredible. Check out their website, courtcafela.com. It's not a relatively big place, but it looks like the brunches are crazy. I mean, we were there on a Tuesday morning, and I was glad that we went at the time that we went, because we went there as soon as they opened at like 9:00. And the food was, oh my, I ate so much food. Like, I'm really going to have to work out this week really hard. Because the food was incredible. And so we sat there and chopped it up or whatever like that. And he was, and so here's what's interesting. Cornell and I are in this football group, and it's a group of guys we all play together on this Marco Polo, and we're on this Marco Polo app, right? And so so it's videos. You can send yourself or send the group videos of you talking or whatever like that. And so Cornell often would send us videos of him posted up on the block, quote unquote, the block. And this block is where he grew up at, and it's in South LA or South Central LA, whatever you want to call it. And so he was like, yo, what you doing next? I was like, I was like, bro, I don't have no plans. Like, the day is free. He's like, you want to go to the block? I was like, yeah. And I had seen plenty of videos of him on the block. And when they're on the block, it's just him and like some old heads from his neighborhood. Some of the people are older than him, and Cornell, I think, is a year older than me. So, but he got to South Carolina State in '89. I got there in '91. But yeah, like, old heads, a couple of former gangbangers. So like, it's whatever. And it's just it's a cool vibe, right? So he takes me, so the block is located, I want to get this right, it's 77th and St. Andrews. So that's St. Andrews, like one block over from Western. So if you're from LA, 77th and Western. I'll tell you about their streets in a little bit. And so I kicked it out there with them. Oh man, we got there, I don't know, around 11. And I don't think I left till like 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I mean, we were just out there, just people would come through. We had chairs set up. People would come through, say what's up. Cornell would introduce me to them. We have conversation, laugh, joke. It was just like, it's almost like if you're from the South, you probably heard the term, or maybe you don't necessarily have to be from the South to have heard this term, but kicking it under the shade tree, that's what that was. Being on the block is just like that, kicking it under the shade tree. And you can actually see from the block on a clear day, you can actually see the mountain where the Hollywood sign is. And so I thought that was dope too as well. But yeah, being on the block with Cornell and his people were really, really cool. I thought that was dope. I thought it was really, really dope. And South, just from talking to him and having conversations, South Central has changed a lot. It's definitely not the same South Central that he grew up in. And what's interesting was where we were standing was literally across the street from the house that he actually grew up in. And he said the house pretty much the same. I mean, of course, his family doesn't live there anymore, but it was dope. It was dope just kicking it on the block, man. So I finally left the block. I wanted to kind of beat the traffic a little bit, but before I left, I drove through Hyde Park, and I'd heard Hyde Park referenced a lot in rap songs. Didn't really know where it was until I got there. And once I got there, I was like, "Oh, this is Hyde Park." Gotcha. If you know, you know, right? So I took the liberty of driving through Hyde Park, and I while I didn't stop, I did drive past through Crenshaw and Slauson. If you're familiar with the late great Nipsey Hussle, Crenshaw and Slauson was where Nipsey's original Marathon store was, and is the place where, unfortunately, Nipsey Hussle was unfortunately murdered. So I wanted to drive by there just to see what it looked like. I'd seen pictures and everything like that, and it didn't look like how I knew that it wasn't like a functional area anymore. It was weird. It's probably more sad than anything else because you could see where the potential of that area could be. And don't get me wrong, the area is still growing. But you just have memories of seeing Nipsey in videos or seeing Nipsey hanging out at that store, and that was a very popular place. And it's just odd and really sad when you think about it that Nipsey Hussle is no longer with us. But the marathon still continues. Rest in peace to Nip. So I left Hyde Park, and I was like, okay, let me go back. So I went back to the hotel and ended up eating dinner at California Pizza Kitchen on Figueroa. And then when I left there, I walked over to what they call the area called South Park. In South Park, there's a huge Christmas tree, and there's lights and stuff, and people were out ice skating around the Christmas tree. And then to the left of that area is the area where is the front part of Staples Center. And if you're a sports fan, you know that in Staples Center, or just outside Staples Center, there are statues. There's a statue of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, former Laker great Magic Johnson, Shaquille O'Neal, from hockey, Wayne Gretzky, the boxer Oscar De La Hoya. There's another one. What's the guy's name? Chick Hearn, the former announcer for the Lakers. But the statue that I came to see, because I'd been to that area before, because it's literally only 3 blocks away from my hotel. I'd been to that area before and I'd taken pictures. But I went for one reason, and I wanted to see the new statue of Kobe Bean Bryant. There's actually 2 statues. There's one of Kobe himself, and then one of Kobe holding his daughter Gianna. As many of you know, Kobe Bryant and Gianna, as well as 6 others, were tragically killed in a helicopter crash in 2020. Next month will make 5 years of their death, and it's just odd. It's weird. I stood there and I took pictures, and I don't know, man. To me, it's just listen. You know, everybody's gonna leave here at some point, myself included. I want to be around for another 100 years, but the reality is, you ain't gonna make it that far. It's just weird to see and think of Kobe in the past tense. Same for Nipsey. I mean, Kobe, especially the way that he passed away, it's just weird. But it's both a beautiful statues, and I had to take pictures, and I think I posted them on my Instagram story. So that was dope. Being out there amongst the Laker greats, even though anybody knows me knows I don't like the Lakers, but I give props where props are due. But yeah, that was really, really dope and very sentimental moment as well. Right now we got time to take a quick commercial break. On the other side of the break, I'll give you more of my recap of my time in LA. Sit tight, we'll be back in just a second. Are you feeling nostalgic for the golden eras of rap and soul music? If so, tune in to the Rap Soul Podcast. We are your weekly journey through the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, spotlighting the music and the hidden gems that shaped the soundtrack of our lives. From the powerful beats to the soulful melodies, we bring you the best of the past with fresh insights and stories. Rediscover the music that defined a generation. Subscribe to the Rap Soul Podcast and enjoy the vibes. And just like that, we are back. Once again, it's your boy 12 Kyle. This is the 12 Kyle Podcast, and I am recapping my birthday week in the City of Angels, Los Angeles, California. Before the break, I was telling you about what went down on Tuesday. Now let's fast forward to Wednesday, December 11th. That day, if you've been listening to the podcast, you know that about a month or so ago, maybe 2 months ago, I made a bet with my boy Baylor. I made a bet and I lost the bet. The bet was that my New York Yankees would beat his LA Dodgers in the World Series. Well, we know how that went. So my Yankees didn't show up. And so it was time for me to pay up on the bet. So we said that we were going to do lunch. And so we decided on the Marathon Burger. And listen, Marathon Burger, I think it's been open, 6 months or so. Another branch of the Nipsey Hussle empire, if you will. It's my first time. I think it was Baylor. I think it may have been Baylor's first time too, as well. I don't know if Baylor had been before. But yeah, we said we were going to grab some lunch there, sit outside of the Marathon Burger. I follow them on IG, and I was like, okay, well let's see what's happening. And I'll be honest, it was going to take a lot for it to jump up there because I've been to Houston. I'm in Houston quite often. And Trill Burger might be the best burger I've ever had in my life. And so I'm like, I don't know if Marathon Burger can touch Trill Burger, but I went in with an open mind. But yeah, me and Baylor were out there, and that burger was a 10 out of 10. Baylor and I sat and talked, and I paid for his lunch, so I settled my bet. And so that was cool. And Baylor had to run off and drop off a client. He had to go pick up a client or something like that. And so we had planned to meet later. He said he was going to give me a tour of the city. So I told him, we set up a time, but we'd meet later. So when I left Baylor at the Marathon Burger, Marathon Burger's on Melrose. So I drove further north of Melrose to the Marathon store. The Marathon store is another part of the Nipsey Hussle empire, if you will. And this is the second store. It's a boutique store. And what was interesting was, like, when I went in there, I wanted to get some shirts because I'd ordered some shirts online before from their website, but the website, like, there was a break in the supply chain and it took forever for the shirts to get to me. Ultimately, the shirts never got to me and I had to cancel my order. One shirt in particular that I wanted to get was a Crenshaw shirt. So if you're watching on YouTube, thank you for watching us first and foremost. But I'm rocking a Crenshaw shirt. Obviously, this is made famous by Nipsey Hussle. But yeah, when I went in the Marathon store, and shout out to China and I can't remember the other young lady's name. They were super, super dope, super friendly. We had a great conversation. I think I may have stayed in there maybe, I don't know, 20, 25 minutes and just talking. Like, I was the only person in there, so it was cool. But they were really friendly. We were talking about food and they were telling me places, because I told them, it was like, are you from here? I was like, no. I was like, I'm from Atlanta. And they were like, oh, well, you need to go here, you need to go there. And they were telling me about these places where I should go. Now, obviously, I didn't have time to go to all the places, but I did write the stuff down because I will be back. but yeah, it was super dope. Again, salute to those ladies. I can't remember the other young lady's name, but I do remember one of the ladies' names was China. And I ended up buying a couple of shirts. But yeah, they were so cool and so friendly, and so I ended up driving back to the hotel. After that, Baylor came and scooped me up in the Tessie, and took me on a tour of the Crenshaw district. Which I've been on Crenshaw before, but not like this. But where we went, he showed me famous Crenshaw High School. He also showed me Dorsey High School, where his wife Marcy went to school. And so like we were just talking, he was just telling me about, life out there growing up, which is, always interesting. And I find those stories and those anecdotes and those memories from Baylor and Dolomite to be very interesting because, they grew up in an environment totally different from the one that I did. So I find it fascinating, but also not fascinating, like in the sense of like it was something that I want to do. I just don't know how. I think it's a testament to them as to how they made out of it. Because if you think about the socioeconomical area in which they lived and that era as well, gang infested, all of those things, all of the trappings of, society, to be young black men and make it out of those circumstances is a testament to who they are. And they'll tell you they didn't always do the right thing, but they stayed out of trouble for the most part. And they did what they had to do to survive. And I think that's, speaks to the men that you hear on the microphone weekly, and those stories and those anecdotes and things, the memories and things that they shared. Words of wisdom, I think, is something that you could take from both of their podcasts. But so our trip through the Crenshaw district was short because Baylor had to get to another client, and Dolomite had hit me up, and he said, "Hey man, what you doing tonight?" I was like, "Nothing." He was like, "You want to come out to Pasadena?" And I was like, "Sure." And he invited me out to Pasadena because maybe you don't know, some of you know if you follow Dolomite and his podcast. Dolomite is also a comedian, right? And so he's been doing comedy, I think, since March of this year, February, March of this year. So it hadn't even been a year. He's gotten really, really good at it. He had gotten word that there's a comedy show that was going on in Pasadena at this place called the Ice House. It's hosted by D.L. Hughley. Yes, that D.L. Hughley, King's of Comedy D.L. Hughley. And the person that reached out to him said, "Hey, what you got to do is get there early and ask DL, can you get on for a couple of minutes or whatever like that." So he was like, "All right, bet." And so he invited me out to that. So I was like, "Okay, cool." And what I didn't want to do was, even though I wasn't far from Pasadena, I didn't want to get caught in that traffic because LA traffic, I could do a whole nother podcast on LA traffic. The traffic really wasn't, it's bad, but it's not as bad as people make it out to be. And I guess, the couple of times I got caught in traffic, it was rush hour. So I mean, like any rush hour in any major metropolitan city, you're gonna be in traffic. I'm sorry. It's just, it is what it is. But it's so I left downtown and I actually beat Dolomite to Pasadena. I got there early and I decided to grab some dinner. There was a Italian restaurant right next to the Ice House. What was the name of the place called? It was called I can't remember the name of it. But anyway, nice food. I think it's like Torino Brothers or something like that. Tardino Brothers. And so I went there, I ate, and then Dolomite pulled up maybe about a half hour later. And so he was there early as promised. And Dolomite, I were standing out front in the front of the venue talking. We were inside, but in the front part of the venue. And in the back, there's the comedy room. Where people would be sitting at for the show. And Dolomite and I are talking, and the next thing you know, you see a guy walk in, and then another guy walks in, and then you see two more guys walk in. And of the two guys, one was D.L. Hughley. And Dolomite looked at me, and he was like, "All right, I'm about to go holler at DL." And what was interesting about that, and I mentioned this on his podcast the other day. What was interesting about that was like there was no hesitation. Like Dolomite is someone who is trying to really, really get his comedy to take off. And as a friend, I was gonna go support him. So when I was happy that he actually hit me up. Was like, hey man, because here's the thing, we talked, and I told him like when I was coming out, I was like, man, I would love to catch you on a show because I've seen clips, but I've never seen him perform. And as fate would have it, he had a performance on Saturday night. The problem was I didn't get in town until Sunday, right? So I was like, oh man, I guess I'm not gonna catch you. But then when he told me about this comedy show in Pasadena, I was like, okay, that'd be dope. So I drove out there, whatever like that, and so he disappears in the back. He's hollering at DL Hughley. The show's getting ready to start, so I go pay for my ticket. I go sit down, and what was interesting was the young lady who was who was kind of getting people seated. She tried to get me to sit in the front. I'm like, no, I'm not sitting in the front. I'm sitting right here in the back. I was on the back row in the way back, and sat through. Might have been 2.5 hours of comedy. DL Hughley was the host, so he would tell some jokes, then bring on another comedian, tell some jokes, bring on another comedian, and do it like that. And when I tell you, I mean, I knew DL Hughley was funny, but I have never laughed that hard at a comedy show ever in my life. Like, he had me literally almost under the table laughing so hard. Funny brother. And it just, some of the things that he was doing just shows his comedic genius. Now, unfortunately, Uncle Dolomite did not make it to the stage. I guess they had a number of people, already online on, set to come on. And what was interesting was, like, almost every comedian that came out that hit the stage that night, I've seen them like on Def Comedy Jam or something like that, or BET Comic View. Like, these were some heavy hitters as far as comedy was concerned. One of the comics that it really had me laughing was, I was looking at my phone, I wasn't paying attention, and they called the comic's name. The guy's name is Louis Dix, Dix, and I started laughing when I heard him call his name because, like, if you've been following this podcast, you heard on the previous episode last week, I mentioned in the episode, what was it called, 5011 Things. One of the questions was like celebrity lookalikes, and I mentioned on there that, like, when I was in college, people used to always tell me that I look like Louis Dix. I don't think so, but so it's funny because I'm in the audience, but Dolomite is back in the green room with the other comedians, and we're texting each other. And I told him that I said, yeah, man, people would swear up and down like we were twins. I was like, I don't see it, but And so he was like, man, you guys should take a picture together. I was like, I'm not taking no picture with Louis Dix. But Louis Dix was funny. And all of the comedians that came out there were funny. Like I said, it was unfortunate that I didn't get a chance to see Dolomite, but the cool part about that night was that he got a chance to, be in the green room, talk to some other comedians, network, which is just as important as being on the stage. Particularly for someone who's, trying to get where DL Hughley is. And he actually got a chance to share some words with him, that night. So that was dope in and of itself. And, probably a little surreal for Dolomite. And Dolomite I'm sure he played it cool, but, when you're looking at one of your comedic heroes in the face, and it's someplace that you never thought you'd be, I mean, that's gotta be, it's gotta have you kind of antsy a little bit. So that was dope. That was Wednesday night. Thursday, I knew it was gonna be my last full day in LA. So I decided to, we had planned to have lunch. I went back to Long Beach to kick it with Jay Fresh. We had a great lunch, man. We were at this place called the Belmont Brewing Company. It's right there on the water. So we had lunch there. Lunch was good, and we just, reminiscing, was talking about really planning for the future. What 2025 is going to look like for us. And then I left there and I drove. I decided to go through Compton because I hadn't been to Compton yet. I mean, I've been to Compton before. Let me rephrase it. I've been through Compton. I don't know anybody that lives in Compton, so I ain't staying in Compton. And what's interesting is that my wife Cherishing is actually from Compton. The aforementioned Uncle Dolomite is from Compton. I ain't from Compton, but and so is Kendrick Lamar, obviously. But I drove through, rode down Compton Boulevard, rode past the famous courthouse and that big sign where Kendrick shot the "Not Like Us" video. So it was dope. Compton, look. I mean, it doesn't look. There's certain spots, and then there's certain areas like, ooh, okay, where it makes you think like, how do you make it out of a place that looks like this? Which again, you got to salute cats like Uncle Dolomite because like they had to persevere through whatever means that they had to. And so when I left Compton, I did something interesting that I always try to do. I'm someone who I think has a very good sense of direction. So I said I was going to leave Compton and I was going to get back to my hotel without turning on the GPS, right? And how I did that is because like the streets in LA, they run east and west or north and south, and they run by numbers. So, I know that, like, I'll give you an example. My hotel's on the corner of Figueroa and 7th. So if I come across a number, I can just take those numbers and go down till I get to 7, and I'm going to run into the street where ultimately my hotel is, right? So it's pretty simple. Or you can run into the main streets, but the thing is, LA has a bunch of big main streets. So even if you venture out into areas like Compton, you have streets like Alondra, or you might have a street like Central, or what was the other street I crossed? Never mind. But in either way, I don't even think I was in Compton at the time. I was just driving, and I knew I was headed toward the city, and I came across Figueroa, so I turned on Figueroa. And what's interesting was Baylor told me before, he's like, man, if you're on the, because I was on the, I guess, south end of Figueroa, but if you're on the northern end of Figueroa, and I could be getting the directions mixed up here, but if you're on the other end of Figueroa, it's hookers. And I mean, like, I don't mean like just regular, I mean like hookers. Like, and I'll be honest, I ain't seen hookers on the street in a long time, Jack. It's been a minute. And I mean, like, they literally were out there with like bikinis and see-through stuff. And what was interesting was I passed this place called Sluts. Sluts on the outside of Sluts, there was a mannequin that had like lingerie on. And I was like, damn, I wonder and this is on Figueroa. A true story, a place called Sluts. And so I'm wondering if that's where the streetwalkers, where they get their uniforms from. But yeah, so that was cool. And then I got almost back to the hotel, and I was like, you know what? I need to get something to, and I was like, I haven't had a taco since I've been out here. Like I was like, there's no way I can come to LA and be here for a whole week and not have a taco. So I remember being on one of Uncle Dolomite's lives on Instagram, and and there was somebody that popped into the live, or at least in the comments, and the name of the business was Not Yo Tacos. So I remembered that, and I had that listed down as a place that I should visit, to grab something to eat. It's a taco truck. It's on Crenshaw. And so I was almost at the hotel. I was like, you know what? Let me go over here. So I spun around, put it in the GPS, and went up to Crenshaw and stopped by Nacho Tacos. And let me tell you something. Nacho Tacos was amazing. I think I got like 3 tacos, and it was like $20-something, and they gave you a like a like a jar like this big of Kool-Aid. Kool-Aid, folks. Like, I ain't had Kool-Aid since like 95. So that was dope. So I came back to the hotel, ate that. And then I finished off the night by going up to the 73rd floor. On the 73rd floor of my hotel, this is a restaurant called Spire. It's called Spire 73. And that's the rooftop. So you're at Spire. It's overlooking the city, and it's rooftop, and it was dope. And it was a bunch of people up there. I took some pictures and stuff, but what was weird was like by this time it's starting to get cold. Like, so I'm out there in a hoodie, and they got heaters and stuff and heating lamps and stuff, but it wasn't doing enough for me sitting at that bar. So I was like, I had 2 glasses of champagne, and I was like, all right, let me. And the guy was like, do you want another drink? I was like, nah, man, I'm out of here, bro. I can't sit up here. And they had the game on TV. I was like, as dope as it looked and picturesque as it was, I was like, I can't sit up here and be cold. Like, if I were sitting at a table, it might be different, but I was cold. So I was like, let me take it to the room. And then after that, I mean, the next day was Friday the 13th. It was, me traveling back to Ontario airport to, trade in the car and jump back on a flight to head back to Atlanta. Originally, my plan was to be in LA from Sunday to Sunday. So the plan was I was going to fly out Sunday morning, come back Sunday afternoon on the 15th. But had to change my plans because my school, South Carolina State University, made it to the Celebration Bowl, which is held in Atlanta, and they were playing against Jackson State for the Black College National Championship game. So, as a proud alum and a former football player, I wasn't going to miss that. So I cut my trip short by a couple of days. But before I get out of here, let me give you a couple of observations that I made about LA. Every time I go to LA, every time I visit, I always come back home with the idea of I could move out there. I mean, the weather was great all week. Earlier part of the week, it was in the mid 70s, low 70s. I think maybe the last day I was there. Actually, that Thursday, maybe around 63. When I was in Long Beach, it actually drizzled for 3 minutes and 30 seconds. Literally. It literally, as Jay Fresh and I were leaving the restaurant, it was actually drizzling. It drizzled for 3 minutes and 30 seconds, and then it stopped drizzling. So it does rain in Southern California. But what was interesting was it drizzled in Long Beach, but by the time I got to Compton was dry. So, the rain never made it to the city. But yeah, the weather was great. So, I mean, like every time I visit, I get the idea and get the bug about moving out there. The reality is I need a couple more zeros because here's the thing. Like if I moved out there, like I would need to move not only myself, my family, but my in-laws, my parents. Like I wouldn't want to be that far away from my parents. And my in-laws live around the corner from me. So I just, I don't know. But I'm not opposed to, especially with my wife being from Compton. I'm not opposed to the idea of living in LA. If the money's right, I'd do it. Another observation, every interstate is the something. Like it's, instead of saying Interstate 10, it's the 10. And instead of saying Interstate 110, it's the 110. It's the 105. It's the 101. It's the 90. It's like, I don't know why they do that, but that's how they communicate. Also, people out there refer to like the sections based on the streets and the neighborhoods. Like I mentioned earlier, I was on 77th and Western. So like nobody's going to say, yeah, I was chilling on Crenshaw today. And they were like, no, because somebody's going to ask you, where were you? You say, I'm on Crenshaw and Pine. I'm off of Crenshaw and Pine, like that. So like, and I don't know that Pine's a street. I'm just using that as an example. Another observation, LA is one of the coolest and most laid back cities that I think you can go to. I've been to a lot of places. For your bang for your buck, I don't know that there's many places that are cooler. And the people is very diverse. And another observation I know about LA, and I've known this for a while. Knowing where to go as well as knowing where not to go is just as important. Let me say that again. Knowing where to go and knowing where not to go. Because obviously, there's some bad places. I mean, you got gangs. Baylor drove me past the jungles. I saw enough of the jungles from where we drove that I don't need to get any closer to the jungles. Shout out to the jungles. But you will not catch me in the jungles. Personally, I don't think that you probably should go any place called the jungles. But I did see the jungles from a distance. I saw Baldwin Hills too. Now, I would like to visit Baldwin Hills because I think like if the idea ever came to fruition that of me moving out to LA, I think Baldwin Hills would be a great spot. And let's see what else. Oh, last but not least, just FYI, I'm already planning another trip. God willing, it'll be next summer, because here's the thing. I've never been to LA in the summertime. All of my trips have always been out there in the wintertime. And just as I was packing up my stuff Friday morning to head back to LA, I got an alert on Instagram that the Roots Picnic will be in June. Guess where it's going to be? LA. And guess who's never been to a Roots Picnic? Me. Maybe that's a sign. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for checking out this long edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. If you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe to the podcast. You can find the podcast wherever you get your podcast. We're on Instagram, Twitter X, Blue Sky, Threads, what else? TikTok. So you can follow us on social media. If you're on YouTube, thank you for watching again. YouTube, subscribe there, hit the notification button. That way you get notifications when we drop episodes. Also, we have merch. Click the description box. There's a link that says merch. You can purchase 12 Kyle Podcast t-shirts, hoodies, as well as posters, as well as coffee mugs like the one I'm holding right here. We got it for the low. And last but not least, we have a new baby. It is called the Rap Soul Podcast. You can find the podcast wherever you're listening and watching this podcast. The Rap Soul Podcast is the intersection of hip hop, rap, R&B, soul music from the 80s, 90s, 2000s. It is the best music podcast that you've never heard. So go check it out. Again, that's going to do it for me. I am your boy 12 Kyle. We'll catch you guys next time. 5,000. Cheers.
Thanks again for listening to this episode of the 12 Kyle podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure that you hit the subscribe button and share this podcast with a friend who needs the 12 Kyle podcast in their life. Every listen, every download, and every share helps us grow. Thanks for being a part of the 12 Kyle podcast community. We appreciate your support. We will catch you next time. 5,000.